A priest opens the cellar door. Darkness breathes out. The walls drip with rot. In the corner, rags, a cracked bowl, and bones too small to be adult. Above the iron door, a crucifix hangs upside down. Chains swing softly from the ceiling. Something has been scratching. Something is still alive. She prayed before every punishment. Fasting made her holy. Blood made her clean. She quoted scripture as she beat them, buried them, broke them. This is not a legend. This is not hysteria. This is Russian history, and she wasn't a monster in the woods. She was a noblewoman, a widow, a saint. Her name was Daria Saltikova, and behind her chapel doors, she turned God into a witness and girls into offerings. Welcome to the channel, where history bleeds, and justice never comes fast enough. Today we drag a name from the footnotes of Russian history, a name buried in silence and 100 shallow graves. Not a warrior, not a Tsar, a woman, draped in lace, haloed in incense, protected by the church. To the bishops she was devout, to the nobles generous, but to the girls she employed, she was something else entirely. In her mansion every prayer was a warning, every hymn a countdown. Behind the altar, a ledger, behind the smile, a knife. She didn't rage, she didn't scream, she smiled, quoted psalms, and watched the life drain out of children she called unclean. This is the story of Saltikova, Russia's Lady of Bones, and the terror she built with faith, silence, and her own 2 hands. The mansion stood on the outskirts of Moscow, draped in frost, crowned with icons, and echoing with hymns. Servants called it holy ground. Outsiders called it blessed, but inside those heavy wooden doors, the floorboards creaked with another name. Saltikova, the Lady of Bones. Daria Saltikova was 25 when her husband died. A young widow with wealth, status, and grief she wore like a veil. She retreated into mourning, or at least that's what the public believed. She donated to churches, funded new chapels, kissed the hands of bishops. Her manor became a sanctuary of lit candles and whispered prayers. Even the Tsar's court praised her piety. But within those hallowed walls, something was growing. Not grief, but hunger. She began with discipline. Nothing strange, just strictness. Fasting for servants, silence during meals, mandatory kneeling for hours on stone. It was framed as moral correction, spiritual purification. The church approved. Daria called it mercy. Then the punishments darkened. A servant girl dropped a porcelain plate, a gift from St. Petersburg. Daria did not shout. She simply smiled and recited a verse. The wicked shall be scourged with many stripes. The girl was beaten until her back split open, then left to sleep in the snow. A maid coughed during morning prayer. She was locked in a box barely large enough to sit. For 3 days she was given nothing but water and scripture. When she emerged, she had chewed off part of her own sleeve. She never spoke again. Daria kept a collection under her bed: a birch whip, a branding iron, a jar of salted brine, and a Bible, pages annotated in red. She would run her fingers over verses like love letters. Her favorite, "Spare not the rod." No one challenged her. The priests she funded turned blind eyes. When whispers rose in the village, the church silenced them. After all, what noblewoman would harm those beneath her station? She was educated, a mother of sons, a devout widow. She fasted on Fridays, donated wax for every saint's feast day, even kept relics in her prayer room. But within the estate, the air thickened with fear. Girls were beaten for smiling, slapped for walking too loud, lashed for finishing chores too slowly. The punishments became rituals: cold baths in the dead of winter, forced kneeling on hot stones. A misstep at Vespers meant 10 lashes, a forgotten broom, starvation. She prayed before each punishment. She fasted while they bled. She never raised her voice, and always she smiled. Servants came and went, mostly went. Some said they ran away, others simply vanished. Their names were removed from the records. Their rooms were cleaned. Their families, poor and powerless, received no letters, no explanation, no justice. But still, more girls arrived. Families, desperate for income, sent daughters to work at the manor of the Holy Widow. What better place than Saltikova's blessed estate? One priest noted in his journal that Daria's candles never seemed to burn out. Her chapel glows like heaven, he wrote, but the girls seem thinner every week. A nickname began to spread in the village, carried in hushed tones through bakeries and farmhouses: Saltikova. It meant nothing at first, just a cruel twist on her name. But inside the manor it meant something else. It meant don't speak, don't run, don't cry, because she was always listening. One girl, Tatiana, tried to flee. She made it as far as the river before she was dragged back by the groundskeeper. Daria embraced her like a daughter, wiped the blood from her chin, whispered scripture in her ear, then had her confined to the wood cellar for 2 weeks, fed only crusts and verses. Tatiana would later scratch a message into the underside of her bed frame, using the jagged edge of a splinter. God is not here, but God was invoked constantly. Daria would whisper to him during beatings, ask for strength as she cleaned the blood, thank him for testing her with disobedient servants. She did not see herself as cruel, she saw herself as chosen. She believed pain revealed truth, and as long as no one spoke, it worked. At Saltikova's estate, silence was not peace, it was pressure, thick, crawling, ready to snap, the kind of silence where every breath feels stolen, and every echo might summon her name. Daria didn't just punish anymore, her punishments became sacred procedures, rehearsed, repeated, ritualized. A girl was late to morning prayer, she was made to kneel on firewood, arms outstretched with iron candlesticks until her muscles locked. Another forgot to polish the icons, her head was shaved, and she was forced to sleep in the frost without blankets, whispering psalms until sunrise. The mansion changed shape, rooms were reassigned, some were stripped of furniture and padded with straw. One pantry door was reinforced with iron, it became the correction room. Another led to a converted ice cellar where the walls sweated and the floor never thawed. These were no longer punishment spaces, they were chambers of transformation, designed to break the spirit before the body. Saltikova kept notes, a book she called The Rule of the Righteous. In it she wrote infractions like scripture, spoke too loudly, 10 lashes, smiled during chores, kneel in ash until vesper bell, touched bread before blessing, fasting, water only. Each sentence ended with a red X, a mark she carved herself with a knife kept hidden in a velvet pouch beneath her pillow. It was said she kissed that knife before every punishment. Girls disappeared regularly, some claimed they ran away, but others remembered the smell, something metallic behind the chapel, or the sound, boots scraping stone deep beneath the floorboards. Once a maid named Irina found a patch of dried blood on the threshold of the prayer room. When she asked, Daria gently placed a hand on her cheek and said, "Faith leaves stains. You'll learn." New girls kept arriving. Families were desperate. The Saltikova estate paid well, and Daria still wore the mask of piety outside the walls. She donated to the church, kissed icons, fed beggars outside the chapel. She confessed weekly, though no priest ever dared ask what she confessed. Inside, the staff began to speak in signs. Fingers tapped on tabletops meant she's coming. A broken broom left by the fireplace was a warning, stay quiet, stay invisible. But not everyone could stay small enough to survive. A maid named Anna, barely 14, was punished for slowness. Her crime, she dropped a pail of water while trembling from fever. Daria dragged her by the wrist through the chapel, past the iconostasis, into the crypt. For days no one saw her. Then one evening she returned, ribs visibly misshapen, walking as if each step cracked a memory. That night, Anna stole a bit of charcoal from the kitchen stove and scrawled a message on the underside of a linen cupboard. "Help me, Saltikova." But no help came, not from the church, not from the courts. Peasant girls had no voice, their pain had no weight, and Saltikova knew it. Still, someone was watching. A boy, Alexei, worked in the stables. He was quiet, nimble, ignored by most, but he saw the bruises, the missing girls, the blood on the straw mattress that was always washed but never clean, and he had learned to read, so he wrote. He wrote letters to local clergy, to noble families, to bureaucrats in Moscow, all anonymous, all signed with a symbol, a candle crossed with bone. Most were ignored, one was burned, but one reached a hand that mattered. In a villa in St. Petersburg, beneath the vaulted ceilings of the Empress's chambers, someone opened Alexei's letter. It was short, choked with spelling errors, but it ended with a sentence no one could ignore. "She buries girls. Beneath the altar, ask the priests." The letter reached Moscow like a curse smuggled in ink. A child's trembling hand had pierced the veil, and finally the state blinked. Catherine the Great had heard whispers about Daria Saltikova before. She had read reports of runaways, disciplinary accidents, and mysterious illnesses, but the church had always protected her. The nobility closed ranks. No one wanted a scandal. No one wanted to admit a noblewoman could turn her estate into a butcher's chapel. But now, there was a name, a detail, a location. Beneath the altar, Catherine dispatched magistrates in disguise, not soldiers but guests, men trained to sip wine with smiles and read lies like scripture. They arrived at Saltikova's estate as inspectors of taxation, claiming to audit her land holdings. She welcomed them with grace, poured them tea from gold-laced porcelain, and quoted the Psalms when asked about her servants. Everything was clean, silent, polished, until one afternoon, as the magistrates were finishing their ledgers, a servant girl placed a tray before them. Her hands trembled. On the underside of the tray, in soot and sweat, was a single word scratched with a nail: crypt. That night they searched. They descended beneath the private chapel, into the forgotten cellars once used for storing wine. The air was thick, too thick, wet. The walls wept. The floorboards moaned like something alive. Behind a rotten wooden panel, they found the first door. Inside, blood-soaked nightgowns, some sized for children. Beneath the stone basin, teeth, dozens, tiny, shoved into cracks like offerings. Farther in, sealed in barrels once meant for preserving salt pork, they found bones, curled, crushed, finger bones tied with rosary beads. A ledger, wrapped in oilskin, lay atop a pile of cloth. Elena, 14, punishment incomplete. Tatiana, 12, irredeemable. Irina, 15, silence achieved. Some names matched death records, most did not. The next morning they confronted Daria. She did not weep, she did not beg. She smiled, as if this too were part of her ritual. I did God's work, she said. These girls were impure. I cleaned their souls. She spoke like a nun, like a martyr, like a saint testifying her own gospel. But then, one girl stepped forward. Her name was Zoya, 16, pale, silent until that day. She'd survived 6 punishments. Her spine had been broken once, her fingers were mangled, but her voice still lived. In front of the court she described the cleansings, the ice baths, the whippings, the forced prayer marathons in freezing cellars, the suffocations called holy silence. She said, Saltikova only punished girls, always the ones who still believed God could hear them. Then another girl spoke, and another. The magistrates stopped counting at 137. Some testimonies named the dead, others couldn't. Only faces remained, or scars, or a certain perfume Daria wore before choosing her victim. The trial shook the empire. Nobles muttered about hysteria. The church deflected blame. But the evidence bled through every word. Saltikova refused to confess. She kept quoting scripture. She told her interrogators they would burn in hell for interrupting her divine purpose. She never said sorry, and she never blinked. The court passed its verdict, but it wasn't death. That would have been mercy. She would be locked away, alone in silence, for the rest of her life. They didn't give her a gallows. They gave her a cell. Not in a prison, but in the Ivanovsky convent, a place once meant for redemption, now repurposed for something darker. For 33 years, Daria Saltikova would live in a stone tomb crafted by royal order. No sunlight, no voice, no warmth, just a slotted grate in the door where food would slide through once a day. The Empress herself had written the instruction: she will not die, she will remember. The cage was not large enough to stretch. She slept sitting, her breath turned to mist in winter. The nuns were forbidden to speak to her, but sometimes they swore they could hear her whispering in Latin, not prayers, names, the girls she had broken. She would scream at night, not in pain but in rage. Other times she laughed, not with joy but with memory. When visitors asked what became of her, the convent only said, she lives, she counts. Word spread across Moscow. The noblewoman turned demon, the holy widow who fasted on blood. Peasants would spit at the gates of the convent, carving crosses into the walls. Mothers warned their daughters, don't speak back, or Saltikova will hear you. But there were others, powerful families, who demanded silence. They wanted her name forgotten, buried, like the bones beneath her estate. The Orthodox Church never excommunicated her. Her land was quietly seized, her portrait removed from the family hall, her name struck from prayers. But the cell remained, and inside it, Daria lived longer than anyone expected. 3 decades passed. Nuns grew old. Monarchs changed. The world forgot wars. But Saltikova remained, silent, breathing, watching, until one morning, no screams, no movement. A nun opened the slot. No response. When they unlocked the door, they found her kneeling, eyes closed, mouth twisted in a half prayer, half smirk. She had died as she lived, alone, unrepentant, and believing herself holy. There was no funeral, no gravestone, just a burial in unconsecrated ground behind the convent, marked with a single word, unnamed. But her name was never truly buried, because the walls remembered, and so did the dead. Daria Saltikova is gone. The stone cell is empty. The food slot rusted shut. The convent no longer speaks of her, not in sermons, but memory has a different gospel. Her estate still stands, the windows boarded, the chapel caved in, the prayer books mildewed and blood-stained. Locals cross themselves when they pass it. Children dare each other to knock on the cellar door. No one ever stays long. Some say the bells ring at night, though they were taken down years ago. Others claim they've heard the clink of chains beneath the floorboards, or felt the cold breath of something behind them in the halls. What lingers is not her body. What lingers is what she took. 137 names, girls erased from church records, buried in salt, forgotten by bloodlines too ashamed to claim them. Their ghosts are not vengeful, they are patient, because history remembered Daria Saltikova, not as a saint, not as a noble, but as something colder, a holy widow who starved herself before slaughtering girls, a devout woman who turned prayer into torture, a monster who lived in silence and died in it. They called her many names, but one echoes louder than the rest: Saltikova, the Lady of Bones, and the dead, they are still listening.